For a long time, podcast growth was framed as a volume game. Post everywhere, show up daily, repurpose endlessly, and hope that something sticks. But in 2026, that approach isn't just exhausting, it's ineffective. Because the truth is, posting everywhere isn't what grows a podcast anymore. Being findable is. That's why today I wanted to walk you through why discoverability beats marketing, how search, titles, formats, and structure are quietly doing the heavy lifting behind the scenes, and what actually helps a podcast grow even when you're not online to promote it. Let's get into it. Hello. Welcome back to this week's episode of As It Relates to Podcasting. I'm Simona Costantini, host of the show, and I'm really excited to have you here for this conversation today because we're talking about growth and podcast growth in 2026. This is a really important topic because there's a lot of things that we don't really share about publicly online of how creators grow, how people tap into new markets, and how people get their message in front of the people that they need to have their message in front of. Before we go any further, I want to invite you to check out my membership community. It's called the Podcast Success Vault. The link for that is in the episode notes below. This community is absolutely brilliant. This is where we go in, we talk about all of our different growth strategies, the challenges that we're having, the things that we want to be doing and to move the needle forward. And we do it in community. We do it together and we do it with other podcasters who are just like you, looking to grow, looking to monetize, and looking to make a real impact with their voice. So the link to join us is in the episode notes below. I would absolutely love to have you, and I would love for you to check it out. Let me know if you have any questions about that. And let's move on to today's actual conversation. I thought this topic was really important because the landscape of podcasting is changing. The way shows are grown and discovered are changing. Shows that may have gotten 10 to 15 to 20,000 downloads an episode before may now be getting 4,000 to 5,000 downloads an episode. The way in which people consume content and media has changed. And I don't say this number to discourage you, but just to paint a bit of a reality that if you have your podcast and the podcast is consistently growing, this means that you are tapping into the correct audience and you're answering the right questions and people are resonating with your message on a bigger scale. This is so important. How you continue to cut through the noise is everything. And you know me, I like to break things out into 3 different parts. So the first part that we're going to talk about is the truth that growth now happens before people even press play. One of the focuses that I've had within the agency for the last couple of years, and I do this with every strategy review that I do for a client, is really focusing in on your titles, your episode titles. A lot of the times people don't think that episode titles actually matter, but they really, really do. Sometimes people will title their episodes with episode 5 with Dan. And that tells your audience nothing. They don't know who Dan is. They don't know what the conversation is about. And so why would they go and press play on something that they don't know if they're even going to enjoy? But here's also why titles are more important than your promotion frequency. The way in which the platforms work is that they decide whether to show your episodes before anyone even hears your voice. So making sure that you have titles that are clear, that are searchable, versus being clever will always win every single time. People are so overwhelmed with decision making. People get so much content thrown at them every single day. The more clear you can be with your title and the way in which you can deliver on the promise you are giving your audience is so important. So making sure that your titles are clear, that they are searchable, that they are discoverable will always win in the grand scheme of things. Because I want you to think about your title. If you're publishing your podcast episode, ask yourself, would you type this question into Google? Would you type this question into Apple Podcasts? Or would you type this question into YouTube? If the answer is no, then maybe you need to go back to the drawing board, right? You got to think about the way in which people consume content. Titles is a really important place to start. So I personally would rather post one time with a podcast episode with a really clear title than posting 5 or 6 times with things that are very vague. I want to cut through the noise. I want to help people. I want my content to land and people be like, yes, this is exactly what I needed. exactly what was helpful for me in this exact moment. So think about, what is the search intent? What are people searching for? How does your content come up as the solution to your questions? The second piece here is your descriptions. Descriptions should explain what the episode is about in the first 2 sentences. This is something, and I heard this the other day from someone that I was hopping on a strategy call with, that they weren't too concerned about the strategy of the show. They were more so just wanting to make sure the production of the show was ongoing. And I absolutely love that. My mentality is, if you are already there doing the work and you're already putting the episodes out there, you may as well incorporate the strategy into what you're doing from the get-go because you're already there doing it. So think about your descriptions. Think about how you are answering your listener's question in those first 2 sentences. A lot of the times creators will bury the lead, and this means that they're burying the most important piece instead of leading with that really exciting value. But the reality is today that platforms and listeners, they don't wait. They're not waiting for you to tell them what the content is about. They want to figure it out right now, and if they can't figure it out, then they're gone. So the first 2 lines of your description should answer, who is it for? What problem does it solve? And why should they care? These are my 3 questions that I go back to every single time, whether we're launching a brand new podcast, doing a podcast strategy or audit, or even just looking at the podcast overall and planning content out. I want you to think about that if someone read your description and they stopped reading it after the second line, would they still know why to listen? Would they still know what the content is that you're going to get out of it? And the third piece here is your consistency, right? So your consistency in format. The consistency in which you share your episodes will train your algorithms and it trains your listeners. So having the same style of titles, the same type of structure, the same type of audience. Algorithms learn faster when you stop confusing them. So you need to get clear about what kind of podcast are you creating, what kind of content are you putting out there, and what is the structure of that content. Listeners will build trust with you when they know exactly what they're getting. So what this really means that being consistent is not boring. It's strategic. And this doesn't mean that you have to take the creativity out of what you're doing, because a lot of the times we get to be creative even within a little bit of consistency. So I know for my show, the format of this podcast, I like to do solo episodes. I like to do them in 3 parts. I like to have 3 main parts that I take my listener through because it's an easy way for me to be able to structure the content, for me to be able to share what I need to share with you in a clear and concise way, and for you to be able to take away all of the nuggets that you want to take away. It's also fun too, if you have more of a lifestyle podcast, yes, like you can be a little bit more creative and you can be a little bit more rambly and share some more stories, but at the same time, you also need to know when to rein it back. Do people actually care about all of the information, or is there a way that you can kind of condense it down and still make it funny, still make it relatable, still making it engaging? Now, the second part here is your SEO. SEO is doing all of your heavy lifting. I want you to think about, what are your keywords? What are the core keywords that you are trying to rank for your podcast? Pick one main keyword that you are trying to rank for per episode. And then you want to kind of pick a phrase, if you will, and you use it naturally in your title, in your description, in your show notes. And the reason why we're doing this is because it is what starts to build your authority and your relevance in that topic. So if today's episode is talking about how to grow your podcast in 2026, I'm going to have that in my title. I'm going to have that in the first few lines of my description. I'm going to have it throughout my description, and I'm going to have it within my content itself, the actual spoken content, right? This should appear more than once without sounding robotic. The second thing is the clarity in the content, answering 1 main question per episode and not 5. Being clear on the content that you are bringing forward. What are we talking about? What are we covering, right? Multi-topic episodes can dilute the search signal, so it confuses the algorithm. And we want clarity, right? So having a clear intent, because clear intent helps platforms understand who to serve your content to, and the depth in which you can go in that content is more strategic than how wide you can go, right? Everyone always wants to hit the hundreds of thousands of people and listeners and all of the things, and that's fantastic. And sometimes the way that we do that is by narrowing down and getting really, really, really specific versus being so broad that the algorithm is confused and has no idea what to do with your content. If your podcast episode is here answering 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 questions, it's probably not answering any of them very well. So just think about that and just consider that. The next piece here is your structure. So structuring episodes so that platforms actually understand them. There's a basic structure that we can follow when it comes to creating a podcast. You have your intro, right? Your clear intro stating what is going to be covered. And then you have your logical flow of content. We have that flow for a reason because yes, it's awesome to be able to go off the cuff and to, share your whole podcast episode without a script or without any guidance or anything like that. But what happens is a lot of the times people will get off track, people get confused, they get lost. And then it's like, okay, well, what are we actually talking about in this episode? So making sure that you have some kind of flow to your podcast episode is also really helpful. Having a little bit more structure helps your listeners stay longer, which ultimately is going to boost your discoverability even more. The algorithms are paying attention to how long are people staying on your content for, right? So really think about this. When you are creating your content, you want them to stay, right? You want them to retain in your episode. Now, the third part of our conversation, and I think this is where it gets really interesting, the idea that marketing supports your discovery, it doesn't replace it. I want to share this idea with you, and the idea is that we all post social media content, right? You post social media content about your podcast episode, you are sharing about your podcast episode, you're sharing your clips and your quotes and all of the things, which is fantastic. The best social media content is going to amplify content that is already clear. So social media isn't here or meant to be fixing confusing messaging. And your content and your clips and your quotes are always going to perform better when the premise of the episode or the show or the content is clear and obvious. Having good discovery on your podcast is actually the thing that is going to make your promotion way, way, way easier. Marketing cannot save unclear positioning. So you want to make sure that the clarity is coming from your podcast first and that you are amplifying and boosting it with your social media marketing, with your newsletter marketing, with your cross promotions, with whatever else you're doing. The second thing here is that a lot of the times people will post everywhere and hope that people will find their content. But random posting really doesn't fix this unclear growth. And more platforms does not mean more growth. It can actually mean the opposite and actually be a lot more confusing for people. Repurposing your content without a strategy makes people confused, and it makes you confused because you don't really know where your audience is and you don't really know who you're trying to reach and where you're trying to reach them. But the key in all of this, and this is the really fun part, I recently had a video on YouTube expand past the normal amount of views that I get, which was so exciting. And it just proved this concept true, that growth compounds when people find you without you being online. The idea and the purpose of search is that it's working for you while you're sleeping. You want to make discoverability a key aspect of your 2026 growth plan because this is what is going to get you those long tail listens. Yes, it's great to have an influx of people come into your podcast episode when you first launch it, but then what? What happens after that, right? What happens after the podcast episode goes live? How many people are still tuning into the content weeks later? That is a really cool metric to pay attention to. Growth of your podcast should not require constant performance. So I share all of this with you today because this is a shift that a lot of podcasters haven't really made yet. Marketing in and of itself doesn't create growth. It supports the growth that is already there. Growth in and of itself is built earlier. It's built in the titles when someone clicks. It's the description that makes sense to people immediately. And the structure that tells your audience and tells the platform exactly who your show is for. At the end of the day, you want to make sure that your podcast is clear, that it is consistent, that it is discoverable. And then at that point, your marketing kind of becomes optional instead of mandatory because it's doing all of the work for you behind the scenes. So if growth has felt harder for you than it should, it's not because you're not posting enough. It's because you may have a discoverability problem and a clarity problem. And the point and the purpose of today's episode is to help you make discoverability a little bit more clear in your goals in 2026. Thank you so much for joining me for today's episode. I will see you same time, same place next week. If you have any questions, please let me know. Drop any comments where you're listening and always reach out to me. I'm always here, happy to answer all of your questions. Thank you, and bye for now.